At Trumpington, not far from Cambridge town, a bridge goes over where the brook runs down, and by that brook there stands a mill as well, and it's God's truth that I'm going to tell. There was a miller lived there many a day, as proud as any peacock and as gay. He would play bagpipes too, fish, mend his gear, and turn a lathe and wrestle and poach deer, and at his belt he carried a long blade. Trenchant it was as any sword that's made, and in his pouch a jolly little knife. No one dared touch him, peril of his life. He had a Sheffield dagger in his hose. Round was his face, and puggish was his nose. Bald as an ape he was. To speak more fully, he was a thoroughgoing market bully, whom none dared lay a hand on, or come near without him swearing that they'd buy it dear. He was a thief as well, of corn and meal, and sly at that. His habit was to steal. Simpkin the Swagger he was called in scorn. He had a wife, and she was nobly born. Her father was the parson of the town. A dowry of brass dishes he put down in order to have Simpkin his relation. The nuns had given her an education. Simpkin would take no woman, so he said, unless she were a virgin and well bred, to save the honour of his yeoman stock. And she was proud, pert as a magpie cock. It was a proper sight to see the pair on holidays, what with him strutting there in front of her, his hood about his head, and she behind him all decked out in red like Simpkin's hose. The scarlet red he had 'em. No one dared call her anything but madam. No one who passed was bold enough to try a bit of fun with her or wink an eye, unless indeed he wanted Sim the Swagger to murder him with cutlass, knife, or dagger, for jealous folk are dangerous, you know. At least they want their wives to think them so. And then her birth was smirched, to say the least. Being the daughter of a celibate priest, she must maintain her dignity, of which she had as much as water in a ditch. She was a sneering woman, and she thought that ladies should respect her. So they ought, what with her well-connected family and education in a nunnery. They had a daughter, too, between them both. She was a girl of 20 summers' growth, but that was all, except a child they had still in the cradle, but a proper lad. The wench was plump, well grown enough to pass, with a snub nose and eyes as grey as glass. Her rump was broad, her breasts were round and high. She'd very pretty hair, I will not lie. The parson of this town, for she was fair, intended to appoint the girl as heir to all his property and house and land, and he was stiff with suitors to her hand. He purposed to bestow her, if he could, where blood and ancient lineage made it good. For Holy Church's goods should be expended on Holy Church's blood, so well descended, and holy blood should have what's proper to it, though Holy Church should be devoured to do it. The miller levied toll beyond a doubt on wheat and malt from the land about, particularly from a large-sized college in Cambridge, Solar Hall. 'Twas common knowledge they sent their wheat and malt to him to grind it. Happened one day, the man who ought to mind it, the college manciple, lay sick in bed, and some reported him as good as dead, on hearing which the miller robbed him more 100 times than he had robbed before, for up till then he'd only robbed politely, but now he stole outrageously, forthrightly. The warden scolded hard and made a scene, but there, the miller didn't give a bean, blustered it out and swore it wasn't so. 2 poor young Bible clerks, or students though, lived in this college, that of which I spoke. Headstrong they were, and eager for a joke, and simply for the chance of sport and play they went and plagued the warden night and day, just for a little leave to spend the morn watching the miller grind their meal and corn. And each was ready to engage his neck, the miller couldn't rob them half a peck of corn by trickery, nor yet by force, and in the end he gave them leave, of course. One was called John, and Alan was the other, both born in the same village, name of Strother, far in the north, I cannot tell you where. Alan collected all his gear with care, loaded it on a horse the warden had, and off he went with John the other lad, each with his sword and buckler by his side. John knew the way, he didn't need a guide, reaches the mill, and down the sack he flings. Alan spoke first. "Well, Simon, lad, who's things? And who's your canny daughter and your wife?" Said Simpkin. "Welcome, Alan. God's my life, it's John as well. What, are you in the sequel?" "By God," said John, "needs must has got no equal, and it behoves a man that has nae servant to work, as say the learned and observant. Warm manciple is like to die, such aches and torments in his teeth as he. So Alan here and I have brought you a sack of corn for grinding, and to bring it back. Help us get home as quickly as you can." "It shall be done," said he, "as I'm a man. What'll you do while I've the job in hand?" "By God," said John, "I have a mind to stand right by the hopper here and watch the corn as it gans in. Never since I was born saw I a hopper wagging to and fro." Alan spoke up. "Hey, John, and will you so? Then I shall stand below a short way off and watch the meal come down into the trough. I need no more of that by way of sport. For, John, in faith, I'm one of the same sort, and divn't know nought of milling same as ye." The miller smiled at their simplicity, and thought, "It's just a trick what they're about. They think that nobody can catch them out, but by the Lord I'll blear their eyes a bit, for all their fine philosophy and wit. The more they try to do me on the deal, when the time comes the more I mean to steal. Instead of flour I will give them bran. The greatest scholar is not the wisest man, as the wolf said in answer to the mare. Them and their precious learning, much I care." And when he saw his chance, he sidled out into the yard behind, and looked about without their noticing, until at last he found their horse where they had made him fast, under an arbour just behind the mill. Up to the horse he goes with quiet skill, and strips the bridle off him there and then. And when the horse was loose, off to the fen through thick and thin, and whinnying "Wee-hee!" he raced to join the wild mares running free. The miller then went back, and did not say a word of this, but passed the time of day with John and Alan till their corn was ground. And when the meal was fairly sacked and bound, John wandered out and found their horse was gone. "Good Lord! Help! Help! Come quickly!" shouted John. "Our horse is lost, Alan. The devil's in it." "God's bones, man, use your legs. Come out this minute. Lord save us all, the warden's palfrey's lost." Alan forgot his meal and corn and cost, abandoning frugality and care. "What's that?" he shouted. "Palfrey? Which way? Where?" The miller's wife ran clucking like a hen towards them, saying, "Gone off to the fen to the wild mares as fast as he can go. Curse on the clumsy hand that tied him so. Should have known better how to knit the reins." John said, "Bad luck to it, Alan. For Christ's pains, put down your sword, man. So will I. Let's gan. We'll rid him like a roe together, man. God's precious heart, he cannot scape us all. Why didn't you put the palfrey in the stall? You must be daft. Bad luck to you. Away!" And off ran John and Alan in dismay, towards the fen as fast as they could go. And when the miller saw that this was so, a good half bushel of their flour he took, and gave it over to his wife to cook. "I think," said he, "these lads have had a fright. I'll pluck their beards. Yes, let 'em read and write, but none the less a miller is their match. Look at 'em now, like children playing catch. Won't be an easy job to get him, though." These foolish Bible clerks ran to and fro and shouted, "Whoa, lad, stand! Look up behind! Whistle him up! I've got him! Watch it! Mind!" But, to be brief, it wasn't until night they caught the palfrey. Hunt him as they might over the fens, he ran away so fast. But in a ditch they captured him at last. Weary and wet, like cattle in the rain, came foolish John and Alan back again. Said John, "Alas the day that I was born! We've aunt nowt here but mockery and scorn. Our corn is stolen, and they'll call us fools. Warden and our warm mates in the schools, and most of all the miller. What a day!" So back they went, John grousing all the way, towards the mill, and put the horse in byre. They found the miller sitting by the fire, for it was night, too late for going home. And for the love of God they begged a room for shelter, and they proffered him their penny. "A room?" the miller said. "There isn't any. There's this, such as it is. We'll share it then. My house is small, but you are learned men, and by your arguments can make a place 20 foot broad as infinite as space. Take a look round and see if it will do, or make it bigger with your parley-vous." "Well, Simon, you must have your little joke," and by St. Cuthbert that was fairly spoke. "Well, people have a proverb to remind them to bring their own, or take things as they find them," said John. "Dear host, do get us out the cup. A little meat and drink would cheer us up. We'll give you the full payment on me word. No empty-handed man can catch a bird. See, here's the silver ready to be spent." Down into Trumpington the daughter went for bread and ale. The miller cooked a goose, and tied their horse up lest it should get loose again, and in his chamber made a bed with clean white sheets, and blankets fairly spread. 10 foot from his, upon a sort of shelf, his daughter had a bed all by herself, quite close in the same room. They were to lie all side by side, no help for it. And why? Because there was no other in the house. They supped and talked, and had a fine carouse, and drank a lot of ale, the very best. Midnight or thereabout they went to rest. Properly pasted was the miller's head. Pale drunk he was. He'd passed the stage of red. Hiccuping through his nose, he talked and trolled as if he'd asthma or a heavy cold. To bed he goes, his wife and he together. She was as jolly as a jay in feather, having well wet her whistle from the ladle, and by her bed she planted down the cradle to rock the baby or to give it sup. When what was in the crock had been drunk up, to bed went daughter too, and thereupon to bed went Alan, and to bed went John. That was the lot. No sleeping draught was needed. The miller had taken so much booze unheeded, he snorted like a cart-horse in his sleep, and vented other noises, loud and deep. His wife joined in the chorus hot and strong. 2 furlongs off you might have heard their song. The wench was snoring too, for company. Alan the clerk in all this melody gave John a poke, and said, "Are ye awake? Did ye ever hear sich sang, for goodness sake? There's family prayers for ye among they noddies. Wildfire come down and burn them up the bodies. Who ever heard a canny thing like that? The devil take their souls for what they're at. All this lang night I shall not get any rest. But niver ye mind, all shall be for the best. I tell ye, John, as sure as I'm a man, I'm going to have that wench there if I can. The law grants easement when things gan amiss. For, John, there is a law that gans like this: if in one point a parson be aggrieved, then in another shall he be relieved. War corn is stolen, never doubt of that. Ill luck has followed us in all we're at, and since no compensation has been offered against war loss, I'll take the easement offered. God's soul, it shall be so indeed, none other. John whispered back to him, Be careful, brother, the miller is a terrible man for slaughter. If he should wake and find you with his daughter, he might do injury to you and me. Injury? Him? I count him not a flea. Ellen rose up. Towards the wench she crept. The wench lay flat upon her back and slept, and ere she saw him, he had drawn so nigh it was too late for her to give a cry. To put it briefly, they were soon at one. Now, Ellen, play, for I will speak of John. John lay there still for quite a little while, complaining and lamenting in this style: A bloody joke! Lord, what a chance to miss! I shall be made a monkey of for this. My mate has got some comfort for his harms. He has the miller's daughter in his arms. He took his chance, and now his needs are sped. I'm but a sack of rubbish here in bed, and when this jape is told in time to come, they'll say I was a softy and a bum. I'll get up too and take what chance I may, for God helps those that help themselves, they say. He rises, steals towards the cradle, lifts it, and stepping softly back again, he shifts it and lays it by his bed upon the floor. The miller's wife soon after ceased to snore, began to wake, rose up and left the room, and coming back she groped about in gloom, missing the cradle John had snatched away. Lord, Lord, she said, we nearly went astray and got into the student's bed. How dreadful! There would have been foul doings. What a bedful! At last she gropes to where the cradle stands, and so by fumbling upwards with her hand she found the bed, and thinking naught but good, since she was certain where the cradle stood, yet knew not where she was, for it was dark, she well and fairly crept in with the clerk, then lay quite still and tried to go to sleep. John waited for a while, then gave a leap, and thrust himself upon this worthy wife. It was the merriest fit in all her life, for John went deep and thrust away like mad. It was a jolly life for either lad, till the third morning cock began to sing. Alan grew tired as dawn began to spring. He had been hard at work the long, long night. Bye-bye, he said, sweet Molly, are you all right? The day's come, I cannot linger here, but evermore in life and death, my dear, I am your own true clerk, or strike me deed. Good boy, my sweet, she whispered, take good heed, but first I'll tell you something, that I will. When you are riding homeward past the mill, by the main entrance door, a bit behind it, there's the half-bushel cake. You're sure to find it, and it was made out of the very meal you brought to grind, and I helped father steal. And, dearest heart, God have you in his keeping. And with that word she almost burst out weeping. Alan got up and thought, dawn's coming on. I'd better get back and creep in beside John. But there he found the cradle in his way. By God, he thought, I nearly went astray. My heed is tottering with my work to neat. That'll be why I cannot gan a reet. This cradle tells me I've lost me tether. Yon must be Miller and his wife together. And back he went, groping his weary way, and reached the bed in which the miller lay, and thinking it was John upon the bed, he slid in beside the miller's side instead, grabbing his neck, and with no more ado said, shake yourself, wake up, you pig's head, you. For Christ's soul, listen. Oh, such noble games as I have had, I tell you by St. James, 3 times the night, from midnight into morn, The miller's daughter helped me grind me corn, while you've been lying in your cowardly way." "You scoundrel," said the miller. "What d'ye say, you beast, you treacherous blackguard, filthy rat? God's dignity, I'll murder you for that. How dare you be so bold as to fling mud upon my daughter, come of noble blood?" He grabbed at Alan by his Adam's apple, and Alan grabbed him back in furious grapple, and clenched his fist and bashed him on the nose. Down Miller's breast a bloody river flows onto the floor, his nose and mouth all broke. They wallowed like two porkers in a poke, and up and up again they go, until the miller tripped and stubbed his toe, spun round and fell down backwards on his wife. She had heard nothing of this foolish strife, for she had fallen asleep with John the clerk, weary from all their labours in the dark. The miller's fall started her out of sleep. "Help!" she screamed. "Holy cross of Bromholm, keep us, Lord, into thy hands. To thee I call. Simon, wake up, the devil's among us all. My heart is bursting. Help, I'm nearly dead. One's on me belly and another's on me head. Help, Simpkin, help. These nasty clerks are fighting." Up started John. He needed no enticing, and groped about the chamber to and fro to find a stick. She, too, was on the go, and knowing the corners better than them all, was first to find one leaning by the wall, and by a little shaft of shimmering light that shone in through a hole. The moon was bright. Although the room was almost black as pitch, she saw them fight, not knowing which was which. But there was something white that caught her eye, on seeing which she peered and gave a cry, thinking it was the nightcap of the clerk. Raising her stick, she crept up in the dark, and hoping to hit Alan, it was her fate to smite the miller on his shining pate. And down he went, shouting, "Oh God, I'm dying!" The clerks then beat him well and left him lying, and throwing on their clothes they took their horse and their ground meal, and off they went, of course. And as they passed the mill they took the cake made of their meal the girl was told to bake. And thus the bumptious miller was well beaten, and done out of the supper they had eaten, and done out of the money that was due for grinding Alan's corn, who beat him too. His wife was plumbed, so was his daughter. Look, that comes of being a miller and a crook. I heard this proverb when I was a kid. Do evil and be done by as you did. Tricksters will get a tricking, so say I. And God that sits in majesty on high bring all this company, great and small, to glory. Thus I've paid out the miller with my story.